wildlife management it's not a management issue. It's not even a social issue. It's not even a cultural issue, basically. It's a moral issue.
This is Defender Radio. I'm Michael Howie, and this is Defender Radio, the podcast for wildlife advocates and animal lovers, brought to you by the Fur Bears. Dr. Max Foran is no stranger to telling Canada's stories. He's written dozens of books and articles on subjects ranging from urban sprawl to the international trade of historic Alberta. But in his latest project, he takes on a subject steeped in philosophy, history, science, and industry: Canadian wildlife management. The Subjugation of Canadian Wildlife, published in April 2018 by McGill-Queen's University Press, is an outstanding look at the twisting tale of how wildlife in our country is managed. Perhaps the most all-encompassing book on this subject that does not simply repeat what managers in the political system tell the public. Dr. Foran does a superb job of bringing together the vast array of moving parts, history, and moral decision-making that builds what we know as modern wildlife management. It is an absolute must-read and is accessible for readers of virtually any level, regardless of academic background. Dr. Foran joined Defender Radio to discuss what drove him to write this book, what he learned along the way as a professional researcher and writer, and what he hopes Canada's wildlife management policies can become as we move forward. A lot of what you have written in the past is about issues, I'd say, surrounding this. I see a lot of stuff about land use and development.
Yes, true.
And
true,
you have
true.
taken on a project which is massive in its scope, and I'm by no means a subject matter expert on this. My background is journalism, so
Yes.
I learn a bit about what I need to learn about so I can tell the stories. But I have been talking a lot about wildlife and policy for the last couple of years, and this feels like the definitive book on sort of the whole picture.
Well, thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. That's nice coming from you. Well, it's okay. Let me. And you also want to explain how come I came from where I was to to write this book.
Yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, philosophically, I'm a skeptic. I've so I got Michel de Montaigne in there at the end, and I don't like what we human beings have done to each other and the planet, and at the same time claim to be moral, rational beings. That doesn't make sense to me. And I've always liked animals, but my wife was passionate. Animal rights, big time, worked with wildlife all her life, and she was such a powerful personality, almost transformative in many ways. And she said, "Max, you got to write the wildlife book." I said, "Yeah." I was teaching at the university, and I says, "Yeah, I like that." She said, "Max, you got to write it. You're the only one that can. You write this book." And so I said, "Okay." So I took. Oh, and I'd been thinking about that too, and I said, "Yeah, it's about time someone said something. It's about time I've got to say something." In all my writing, I've been a very balanced academic writer. I see what I see. I get the pros and the cons. I balance and I conclude. I research. I balance and I conclude. I'm a balanced writer. But this time, I threw all that out the window. But I got to make a case. I'm going to make a case, but I didn't know how to do it, and so I came from the philosophical angle, and then once I had the philosophy, clearly in my mind, then I could sit down and do the research. And because I'm a trained researcher, and because the internet is available, and the database at the University of Calgary is unbelievable, because I had the experience, the desire to do it, the will and the passion, I threw everything I had into it. And because my wife was terminally ill and she wanted it done, she said, "I hope I live to see this published, Max. I hope to see this." She said to me a dozen times when she was dying with cancer. And I said, "I'll do my best, mate." But I didn't make it. But she was in a hospice when I told her that the book was going through. and she was delighted. But that's my one regret. I didn't get it in time. Didn't get it out in time. But her presence, her vision, her passion infected me, and my doggedness and my commitment when I get started on something, and I just lost myself in it. And people said, I don't know how you can do this, Max. I says, well, someone's got to do it. It's got to be done. Simple as that.
Well, and in all honesty, as I said, it is an incredibly in-depth book, and for me it was difficult because there are sections that I'm very familiar with, and we'll get into some of that, and sections for me, philosophy, for instance, I have no training or background or experience with it, so it was difficult at times, but you are able to present this history of change and of development through philosophy that I was able to follow. I really appreciate that I'm able to sort of be informed of that in a way that's accessible.
Yeah, Mike, I thought that was crucial because it's not much use me talking about a belief system if I didn't tell the reader, if I didn't kind of give some background on how this belief system came to be, and how a set of opinions become cultural truths. And I wanted to show this, starting from. And then, as you see in the introduction, I linked the Stoics to one of the Supreme Justices of the Court. Mm-hmm. I linked Aquinas to Revenue Canada, and I linked the Catholic Church's Augustine and Aquinas, Augustine and Paul's pronouncements to the Second Vatican Council in 1965. So I linked the presidency. These beliefs still permeate. These beliefs are entrenched and they still permeate. And I'm just questioning them. It's wildlife management is not a management issue. It's not even a social issue. It's not even a cultural issue, basically. It's a moral issue. It's a moral issue. And because government represents the status quo, whereas the body public represents the wide spectrum in everything, and because there's a wide spectrum of including our relationship to animals, everything from animal rights to speciesism, in the main, the government represents the main body of thought, which tends towards speciesism, and that's where we're dead in the water. And a parliamentary democracy makes it very difficult to effect change.
Well, and I've gone through the book and I've got a whole bunch of questions, and typically,
go ahead.
Yeah, typically I don't get my questions as well formed as I have here, but because of the way you've presented the book, I actually have put more time into structuring them. So this is in order of the book, so it may not make complete sense.
That's okay.
And I actually ended up having to go from about 3,000 words worth of questions to 1,000 words worth of questions.
Shit.
I've got you all day, Max. You're not going anywhere.
Mate. Let's do it.
So you do discuss the tale, is how you put it, of power and superiority humans have over non-human animals. Yep. And right now, the concept of social power is becoming more mainstream. And I'm not equating the plight of marginalized or oppressed people to non-human animals. But could the growing, I'd say, cultural consciousness assist in the new belief system that you say we need in order to better treat animals and to, in sort of the grander picture, save our planet?
Yeah. So what's your question?
Do you think that it's that the lessons we are learning, that this growing consciousness...
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. I do think, yes, I do think we are shifting. What I'm saying is that it does not yet constitute, changing of attitudes are the first steps and then changing of behavior will be the second, but behavior won't change until beliefs change. So attitudes will change, yes. And I think gradually behavior is changing too, but I'm arguing not enough to change the belief system yet. You'll notice I discussed that at the end of chapter 1, and I tried to say, beliefs are changing. In fact, I think deep down, I can't prove this, but I think that a lot of people hold animal rights positions but would never admit it.
Yep.
I think so. They're pretty close to it. They're a long away from the welfare position, and that's good. I think people are moving away from the welfare position that simply says you owe animals a right to a quick death, and that being kind to animals makes you better humans. I think we're getting away from that. Yes, I do. But does it constitute a change in the belief system? Not yet. But and being a skeptic, I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's ever going to happen because the price to pay will be too high. But there is a changing mood. Yes, there is.
And as you discussed the price to change, that I found very interesting. Which parts of that change do you think is too high? Is it the everyday challenges from, eating red meat, wearing fur, and choosing solar panels over gas-fired plants? Or is it the larger commitments we've made as a society to the use of petroleum products and international travel?
All of those, but the assumption that we take for granted prosperity is going to be a never-ending. It's going to be a never-ending spiral. The main thing is habitat, Mike. We continue to degrade habitat, and that's going to happen because self-interest means we need to up our lifestyle. We need forest products, or we need these things, and as long as we need things that are going to enhance our standard of living or keep the things we've got now. So if you say, let's take millions of acres and turn it into, leave it alone. Mm-hmm. I think that's inimical to human nature. I think it's inimical to the way we think. We can't leave it alone. It's there. We've got to use it. And I think that's inimical. And that's why I think we will continue. I think the attitudes will change. Eating red meat, yes, and I think there'll be some reforms in factory farms, and maybe we'll put more money into saving species at risk, and maybe we'll set aside some more areas for protection, but nowhere near. We're never going to say. The price of saying we haven't got the right to be involved with you, and we're going to leave you alone. The price of paying that, saying that's too high, given the need for habitat and growth and expansion. That's what I mean by that.
And carrying that thought forward, you talk about rationalization, which I thought was a fascinating subject matter to dive into.
Yeah, I know. My version of rationalization is just the critics are going to come at me for that, yeah, but go ahead. Yeah, you can go ahead with your question.
Could you explain how rationalization works? And I mean, I think the one that really jumped out at me was the rationalizations from hunter-gatherers. That model of respect for animals that we are taking, which we hear historically and currently as well.
I think we want, because we are basically moral creatures. Except we don't extend it too far. We're limited moral creatures. We want to feel good about ourselves. We want to feel okay about ourselves. And when we do what is obviously harm, we want to put a positive spin on it. And so the hunter-gatherers put their positive spin on it, and to a degree, you believe your own rationalizations. But if they looked at it, clinically or without emotionally, if anything, and say, well, you're killing the animal. I mean, it might be a friend, but it's the one dying, not you.
Yeah.
But you want to put a positive spin on everything you do. It's okay. It's all right. We can do this. And I think this is a fault. And there are some versions of rationality that say that a rational person acts in his own self-interest. I don't believe that. A rational person takes emotion out of tries to take emotion out of decisions. In other words, once you take emotion out, you take yourself out. And once you take yourself out, you look dispassionately and say, okay, let's look at this. Let's take your own bullshit out of it, and let's look at this. Mm-hmm. And don't see what you want to see what's there. And I think once you start thinking this way, you start to be more clinical and more objective. But the more you put emotion in, the more you get answers you want to get, and that's a rationalization. That's what I mean. And I think rationalize substitutes for reason, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, what I find interesting too is that it can happen without us necessarily registering it at the individual level.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly, dead on, Mike. And I didn't make enough of that, and I think you're dead on. We really believe that's the way it is.
Yeah.
But when you look at it, stand back. I remember telling my girls when I was growing up, when they were teenagers, and I said, crying out loud, girls, I don't care if you BS, and I don't care if you BS to yourself. In fact, in many ways, you got to BS to yourself. But as long as you know you're doing it, don't see what you want to see what's there.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my advice to my daughters who were teenagers. Sage father trying to be wise. I don't know. You go through those stages where you think you know something and you try to pass it on to your kids.
Mm-hmm.
They turned out okay. But yeah, I agree, Mike. And that's what I mean by rationalisation. And people are going to come at me on this, and that's going to be my answer.
And on the note of rationalization, I think this is and again, it's the way I'm asking these makes me sound very smart, but it's actually the way you wrote this, is the collision of science and philosophy. On one hand, we have scientists showing with remarkable authority and evidence at times that the various species of non-human animals are sentient, self-aware, that they have complex lives, are capable of developing cultures and their own guiding morals. And then we also have the philosophy, again, which you very nicely lay out, that dates back to ancient Greece and beyond, that takes none of the science into account, and it's what drives our laws and policies. How do we get these two sides not even talking together, but just functioning together in society?
That's a good point. I have to think about that. I think that where science tends to integrate with the traditional belief system is its logical argument that man stands outside nature. Of course, we can dictate so many things, we can explain so many things that therefore we're not part of the natural world. We are observing it and we're commenting on it, and I think that suits the belief system just fine. But I do think that and I try to show that there seems to be resistance in science towards accepting things like higher order animal consciousness, even though you got the declaration made by a whole bunch of scientists that said that animals have conscious, have conscious states. I think that we don't seem to heed it. It's out there, but it doesn't seem to change because the price of change is too high. And I come back to the same thing. Now, I'm not sure I'm answering your question here because it's a tough one. I'd have to think about this one for about bloody a few days before I can give you a sensible answer on that one. But because science itself is a very fractured discipline, and science itself is nowhere near as exact as it makes out, and scientists are far less scientific and prone to rationalisation in their personal sentiments, and as I said, that scientists employed by the government and scientists employed by the academic institutions are liable to reach different conclusions about the same things with respect to animals, and have done so, and so there's science and there's scientists, and there's a type of science and the type of scientists, and even dealing with that's immense. So I think, but I do think that the need for answers, the need for something that makes sense outside an acceptance of current beliefs about God and the Stoics and Aristotle and all that, I think that will bear on society eventually. I do think that we start to think more clinically, and because of science. And if we start to think more clinically, then we might start to examine our beliefs. And but then we don't want to be sucked in by science because it goes in certain directions and it creates its own truth. So when you start looking at it, it's not as all-embracing as it seems to be. And so I think science is what I'm saying is science is just as much fractured as philosophy is. And to bring the two together, I don't know. Tough.
Well, North Korea and South Korea are hanging out right now, so I feel like, anything's possible.
Except as a skeptic, I don't know that wacko's hidden agenda in North Korea. I don't know. I'm waiting to see what the hidden agenda is there.
Oh, yeah, I firmly believe that. I am just thoroughly coated with caffeine right now. That is giving me a false optimism.
I haven't had any caffeine yet, so.
All right.
But yeah, and this is something that when I was writing this darn thing, and everyone said to me, Max, you're being too tough. We can do this. And one person said to me, and the best answer I gave, she said, Max, when the need arises, we will change. And I said, yes, but how many species are going to go before that need comes?
Yeah.
And so I do think that there's a natural penchant in us to put a positive spin on things. It'll be okay. Global warming doesn't occur. There is a debate, but we don't. But even the naysayers are trying to find ways in which they can spin this to say, yeah, it's a cyclical thing. It'll be all right. We'll find answers. And see, this is a natural thing. Hope. People. The three virtues we were taught. The Jesuits, I suppose you too, but my upbringing, hope, faith, hope, and charity, and the greatest is charity, and the second greatest is faith, and bullshit, the greatest is hope. That's the one. That's the one that drives humans. Hope. And what I'm doing is stamping on this hope a bit.
Well, incidentally, I'm reading a book that explains that hope is what makes comedy work. So I don't know if there's a connection there.
Hope is what makes comedy work.
Yeah. So it's what is funny is someone who is like the underdog that is facing impossible odds, but is hopeful to be able to accomplish something still.
Exactly.
That's the mathematical equation for comedy, according to this author.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
But yes, it's the driving force of human nature in many cases is hope. We can do this. Mm-hmm. And I suppose the other ones, the faith, builds upon the hope, because then you have the hope that comes into a faith, and then a moral adjunct is added. There's a charity driven by hope. Yeah, I agree. Yep.
We've just solved the world's problems here on Defender Radio.
All we need is a beer between us. A couple of jugs, Mike, and we get really good.
Well, hell, it's 10:30 in the morning on a Friday. Let's do it.
Yeah, maybe not. Give us a few hours.
Yeah. Okay, so getting back on track. You talk a lot about one of the biggest problems in Canadian wildlife policy, and I think probably in all wildlife policy, is the view of wildlife as a resource that requires management.
A resource that has to manifest itself in the human interest. Because once you classify, that's an important thing I say. Once you classify something as resource, you have to show its utility in the human interest.
Yeah. And
because it's way down on the scale of, in terms of human interest, money value, returns, it gets funded accordingly. And so, and of course, you cannot equate aggregates of living beings with truckloads of coal. You can't do that. That's not. There's something patently wrong. You haven't got to be a bloody reasoning colossus to figure that one out, or a moral crusader.
Yeah.
You can't. And that's my point. The 2 points: you can't do it in the first place, and once you do, in the case of call it a resource, you must demonstrate its utility, and then you put it up against the other resources that turn a yield, and you find you're way down, and so you fund it accordingly, and so you don't take that resource too seriously because it doesn't give you the returns. And that's my point.
And an oversimplification of all of this is that there's sort of a clear path that, and I think you just demonstrated that path to where we're at now, the status quo, which is also known as the North American model of wildlife conservation.
Well, wackos.
And that model is held up as the moral compass by many.
Look what they're doing. Look what they're doing now. Look what they're doing. They're going from a straight Leopold, primitive, early ecological paradigm, and now they've trying to integrate themselves into the social consciousness, and now they're trying to say we are the champions of biodiversity. They're doing this rather well, those guys, but yeah, go on.
Well, so my question is, how do we then deconstruct it? How do we show? I mean, I think that within the wildlife community, the flaws of that model are well recognized now. But how do we deconstruct it in such a way that we can move forward with something better?
I don't know. Because you've got to change the belief system. Mm-hmm. And once you start saying, no, you're wrong about the way you're talking about animals. To kill something for fun is wrong, and to plunder your living brethren is not the way to make a better world. And people have got to start thinking angrily about that and say, no, this is wrong. You can't do this. And when people start saying that and start putting their weight behind the groups that are like Animal Alliance and Zoocheck and funding the law guys, Eco Justice, and allowing rehabilitators to do their job, and when people start demanding that animals dead, then the wildlife, then the model will they'll hang out for a while, like the National Rifle Association. Mm-hmm. But if the weight of public opinion bears strongly on them, they're going to have to cut their losses and run and say, all right, now what will you give us as a reward? How can we hunt? And then that's another debate. But they will back off if the weight of public opinion gets and becomes and is possessed the sort of passion you're hearing in my voice and some of the stuff I'm hearing in yours, and if that starts to resonate and people start to listen to it and say enough, like that Peter Finch in Network, so I've had enough of this crap and I'm taking it anymore. And if once we start realizing that and becoming angry, then there'll be a paradigm shift if we got the capability of doing that, because you're bringing immigrants in from other cultures that don't share our culture, even the sorts of things we share, and there's a lot of homogenization to be done there. There's a lot of education to be done, and we've got to educate ourselves. And we are a very flexible, volatile, dynamic society, and therefore consensus be very, very difficult.
Well, and that's, I think, a really good example of that, though, is the grizzly bear trophy hunt in British Columbia, which you do write about, and which
it's in a footnote. Yeah, it's now gone. It's now gone.
Yes, and most hunting of grizzly bears in British Columbia has come to an end. Yeah. I think what's interesting, though, is the comparison. You've got a great chapter on apex predators, and you have grizzly bears immediately followed by wolves. And grizzly bears were trophy hunted, and there was a very, very clear mandate from pretty much all walks of life in British Columbia saying this is morally wrong. And though there have been long debates about the science, it was that moral standard. Yeah. And I think it was even, men in rural regions, even close to 70% of them, the demographic that trophy hunts grizzly bears, said, this isn't right. So it's interesting that we had that success, but then we look at the wolf situation, and we'll use the caribou. They're killing wolves to protect endangered caribou, even though the caribou's really at risk from human activity. Like the wolves are, I think there's actually government documents I've read that said we can kill all the wolves and it won't save the caribou.
True.
So how do we distill down the magic of how we got society to see that hunting grizzly bears for trophies was wrong and transfer that over to killing these wolves for the sake of doing something that won't work is also wrong?
Yep. Reading some literature about wolves, learning about wolves, learning how incredibly social, incredibly intelligent they are, and that but like all us, everyone, all animals and humans, are opportunistic. And if you protect your cattle, and if you allow enough habitat for the caribou to recover, which we're not even doing anywhere. It's a habitat issue. So deal with caribou habitat and educate people about wolves. I mean, educate people about coyotes. Ranchers put up fences, of elk fences, stop things. And you can get there'd be ways in which you could discourage wolves. But you see, with the grizzly, the grizzly's been unable to become an iconic creature because he keeps his ground generally. You've got to go find him, and you've got to then deal with him. The wolf would not keep his ground. He poses a threat, and is therefore like us. He's a deliberate murderer, and you've got to watch out for murderers. Mm-hmm. And so, different completely. And the wolf has got up centuries-old myths about the wolf. This is a big-time legendary animal, and we've only learned the negative side of said wolf. And there's so many things, literature out there, Barry Lopez's book and Gunter Block's book. I mean, there's so many good things out there. So the wolves are really, really fascinating creatures, much like us in the way they behave in good ways. And I think the way to do it is to if we're able to, is to develop a new narrative about wolves. And I think this is where some of these animal groups are doing good things there. They are developing different narratives. It is getting out on social media and Twitter. I mean, start to use those mediums, and it's already being done to begin a new narrative. And once you begin a new narrative, then I think you're well on the way to beginning an attitudinal shift. But again, let me add one thing. Those grizzlies are safe as long as the NDP's in power. Yeah. You couldn't hunt a grizzly back in the early 90s when the NDP were in power. For short, the early part of the millennium when the NDP were in power. When they are out, the Liberals straight back into it again. And when the NDP are thrown out, as they definitely will be, bang, in will come the Liberals, I may imagine, and back will go the hunting on the grizzly. That'll be interesting, Mike. Will a new Liberal government that comes in after BC's NDP have the guts to reinstate the bloody grizzly hunt? I'm not sure they will. Maybe
that would
not.
Be interesting.
And that'll be a big story. That'll be a big thing, Mike. When the Liberals get back, what do they do? And if they keep the ban, that'll tell us something about your first question. That'll tell us something about that. Yep. Maybe we're seeing something. Yeah, maybe.
All it took was them losing an election.
Yeah. So let's put them in. And I haven't seen the Notley government hasn't. The best thing the Notley government's done recently, she's been in power a few years, and now she says that you can rehabilitate. Yeah. Black bears. Just last week. Take your time, Notley. And the good thing she did was stop the logging in most of the Castle Wilderness. But they can't back off. They can't back off the human interest. We're stopping the logging, but you can go in there and you can selectively hunt. We're going to monitor you. And maybe you can selectively trap. But we're going to monitor you, and maybe you can. Maybe we're going to put snowmobiles in there, but we're going to monitor you. Human interest must be attended. Must be, and that's it. You can't say Castle off limits. Can't do that.
The influence of power is constantly remarkable to me, and I don't get it.
This is what it's all about, Mike. This is what it's all about, Mike. When it all comes out, throw out their bloody philosophy, throw out the morals. It's just we can, so we do. It's sheer power. Yeah. Well, so I can't say that. I had to back off a lot on this book, Mike. I had to back off a lot, and I structured it very carefully. And you'll notice I did not. I read an article on hunting just like a couple of nights ago, and the guy said the same things I said, but he was really mad. He had that passion, and he was really going after him. But I had to resist that, Mike. I couldn't do that because then it'd be a polemic. And I didn't want it to be a polemic. I wanted to say, you can't blame the wildlife management. You can't say you're bad guys. You can't say we're all going down the can. We've got to say I have to say those in charge are doing this because they've got the wrong beliefs. Change the beliefs will change the behaviour. And I couldn't make it a polemic.
Yeah.
I was tempted to. And I said, oh, no, Max. My academic training kicked in and said, no, Max, you can't do that. You can't do no. And my editor said, like I said, that when I was doing the spring bear hunt, I said that, it was their lobbying, and I said, the Premier, what's her name, Kathleen Wynne, I said a transparent vote-getter in her own right was on side. And my editor said, but Max, you shouldn't say she's a transparent vote-getter. I said, she is. And my editor said, I know she is, but it'd be best not to say it. You want people, don't make everyone mad in this book because people who like animals will also like her. So, it was unnecessary to say that. So I get it out of there.
Yeah.
And I had a clip of a quote from a guy who just hunted a grizzly, his first hunt. And he was showing how he hit it, was running, and he hit it 4 or 5 times. And he couldn't get over it. It was running, and he kept on pounding the shots in it. And finally, when it dropped and died, he said, a grin was on my face you could knock off with a piece of 4B2. And I had that in, and I called it this. I said, this sickening account is what we're dealing with. And I took it out. No, Max, don't. Back off a bit. And so I tried to be as rough as I could and as hit as hard as I could without throwing roundhouses.
Yeah. Well, and it is hard to do. And
it was.
I think, and again, with my background in journalism, writing about some things, and I do not purport to be a journalist now. I work for a nonprofit with a very, very clear agenda, but I do try and hold myself to some of those standards still. And, it's if I can't prove it, if I can't show it, I am not going to post it. I'm not going to print it. And it is difficult at times and it's the rationalization again, to take that anger and say, how is this best going to help the animals?
Exactly. That's what Heather said all the time when people used to dispute. We said, why we're all we want the animals, and we fight and we argue and we split off into splinter groups. Why? It's the animals, not us. Mm-hmm. And this was a consistent lament to her, and I was trying to make a case, and I was trying to make a case in the best way I knew how, and I didn't want to underhit and I didn't want to overhit. Yeah. And I tried to but I was conscious of it, and I had to resist it big time.
I've got a couple other things here, but there's one I want to end with, because I think, to me, as someone who is peripherally involved in wildlife management policy, who's sort of on the edge of a lot of these different discussions, that is very, very telling to me. And I'm curious for your response to this. Yeah. And you brought it up that hunting, trapping, and outright culls of species happen in protected areas. So we're not talking in just general crown land or on private property, but literally in protected parks. And the surprise that I get from people when they hear about this it's overwhelming. Do you think that's indicative of a major issue in wildlife management and habitat management in Canada?
Yes, I do. To change attitudes when people realise that you see, people want to believe, again, that the wildlife managers and stay in yield and all that are doing the right thing. And they want, it's all right, it's in good hands. These guys know what they're doing. They're scientists. They're employed. They know what they're doing. But when people are aware this is what they're doing, basically behind your back, they're not doing it in secret, but they are doing it. They're very discreet about it. Discreet in the sense of in both uses of the word, double ET and ETE. They're being discreet in both senses of the word. In other words, you're not getting the whole picture. Yep, and this is what they're doing. This is what they're doing because parks are for humans. Everything is for humans. And see, this is what, and I realize that the governments are there for humans. And everything must be legislated, framed, thought about in the human interest. And that's why it's so difficult to stand back and ask governments to behave what they think stands outside the human interest. And that's my dilemma, Mike. And that was a central point in the book. That's the dilemma. But if you can alert people to what's happening in the so-called human interest, that is only a very splinter of the human interest, and most people don't want that to happen, then maybe we will see this. Maybe we will see a change. So it's all about the public. And this is what I'm getting from our dialogue here, from you. And you're making me. You put me in this big picture mode. Mm-hmm. The only way to do it is to make more people upset about it, and then lean on government, who will then lean on, and that might affect change, to make more people. And I'm saying this can't be done. I'm looking at the natural notion of human beings in their own self-interest, and that's where I think the animal rights people. I understand why they started with the wrong issues. They started with animal experimentation and factory farming. Huge. That's maybe where they should have started, and they did. But that wasn't the area they should have started to get their message across. They should have started with wildlife, because wildlife is still doable. It's still doable. We can effect significant change in wildlife management. Not with domesticated animals. I don't see much there, but with wildlife we can. And the way you're phrasing your comments, you're kind of informing me that the best way is there is maybe a way if we get people annoyed enough, ready to put their money where their mouth is and demand change. Yep. And so that was rambling, but I don't know whether you got my point.
Well, the other way I'd look at this is as an example of how we can see critical social change. And I truly believe that we need a clear majority of people, not just vocal people, but of overall people.
Yep.
And whenever I talk about this, I always point to prohibition as an example of legislation that is not supported by the majority.
Yep.
Because prohibition, for those who are not aware, led to the formation of pretty much all criminal activity in the United States at an organized level. So when we look at that,
it couldn't be policed.
Yeah, exactly. It was too
big. Don't make a law you can't enforce.
Exactly. So when we talk about this kind of change, that's why I believe we truly need most people on board.
Exactly.
And I think, though, an interesting example of how that kind of critical social change can happen is looking at straws. And this surprises me, to be completely honest, that this has happened. We know that plastic straws are devastating to nature. We use billions of the things, and they're ending up in whales as sort of the big picture harmful side of it. But right now, with the right pressure and awareness, the use of social media and traditional media, and accessible options, we're seeing legislation come into effect. We're seeing portable straws that are made of metal are selling. You can buy them at the convenience store in some places. Restaurants are not providing straws. And to me, that seems like a sign that with the right lever and fulcrum, we can move this. Do you think that it is the kind of example we can look to as a formula for getting wildlife policy reform as a major campaign?
It is the only way to go. Yeah, it is the only way to go. We were in Hawaii recently, and they gave us leis, and my daughter said, and then they said, "Well, these flowers?" And my daughter said, "What happens to flowers?" He said, "Well, we throw them back into the sea."
Jeez.
And she said, "What about the things that are? What about the strings? Are they biodiversal-degradable?" Well, I don't know. See what I mean? Didn't know that while you throw the lei back in, you don't know whether the string that's attached to it is biodegradable, and it might get entangled in fish. And people are unaware. And you're talking about awareness with straws. Yeah. As awareness, the smoking's another one. You know, who thought? You only got to watch TMC movies to see everyone smoking. Everyone. This is the 60s.
Yeah.
And now no one smokes in movies. Or they do a little bit to make their point if it's a period movie. But yes, that's the way to go. And I do mention that. And if I'm right, and there are more people that hold deeper beliefs about animals who would never harm a living thing in their life if they get out. There's more of these people around than we think, Mike. More of them around. It's just someone's got to be ignited. And maybe you're right. Maybe it's going to be one single issue. Maybe the grizzly, maybe the wolf, maybe the snapping turtle, maybe the sage grouse, maybe the bloody chorus frog. But maybe there'll be something that just lights that fire and just, okay, maybe. But I agree with you, that's the way it's got to go. Yep. And we've got the social media to do it. Like I talked to Eco Justice the other day, and a lot of you guys are promoting my book, Further Defenders, and Eco Justice are sending it. They showed me a message they sent out to their 27,500 Twitter followers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's and my granddaughters, they're blasted the book and the book launch in their Facebook pages. They're just hitting out everyone, and they're my granddaughters, and their friends are doing it. You know, and so it could be a flash in the pan, but one day something just might catch.
I cannot recommend this book enough. Check out The Subjugation of Canadian Wildlife by Dr. Max Foran at your local bookseller or at the McGill-Queen's University Press website, and share the word about this important book with everyone who cares about or is interested in wildlife in Canada. That's the show for this week, folks. I want to thank Dr. Max Foran for joining me and all of you for listening. Remember to follow me on Facebook and Twitter at Defender Radio and on Instagram at Howie Michael. Until next time, I'm Michael Howie for Defender Radio, reminding you to stay informed and stay strong.